Hello, welcome back to Empress Path. My name is SBJ and we're back for update 2 on the TT layout build. Now, if you haven't already watched the first episode where I talk about the station area now that we've completed the loop, you can go back and view that. I've also done an episode based on the layout design and the fiddle yard, so if you haven't watched those, it might be a good idea to watch those first. So, I promised you in last week's episode that we were going to talk about the curved incline, which is sat just behind me. This definitely presented me with a few problems when building it, and certainly stumped me a few times as I was trying to get it all sorted. So I found that I was stepping away for longer periods when working on this section, but once I completed this top bit here, I suddenly sped away. So before I go any further, I would like to remind you that you can listen to a model rail podcast, which some people haven't found yet, and it's called the Model Rail Replacement Podcast, or MERP, which features me and my friend James from the Western Signalman. People have been complaining there's not enough podcasts out there, so we thought we'd just give you the little nudge that it exists. So, moving on. So last time we left off from here, the end of the station platforms. What happens coming out of here is we have the 4 lines that effectively start coming in very slowly and meeting each other here, where they pass under what will eventually be a nice girder bridge. And this is where I consider the start of the incline. So, working on this, I used the track plan that Peachy made me, and I got it printed at a local printing shop and effectively laid it out so I knew roughly where I was going with the curvature. So, I wanted to make sure that I brought the 4 lines together and they sit nice and close to each other using the spacers that I used in the previous videos, and they start going towards the back there. Now, I wanted to make sure that I was using as much of the space possible to do the curves, because I want the curves to be as big a radius as physically possible. So you can see there that the curves, just point it out to you, that this section here is where the incline risers are used. Now, I use the Woodland Scenics 2% incline risers, and one thing I can say is I think I used a third of each box, which obviously proves quite the problem when you're purchasing these boxes for, let's say, £25 each. That's £75 spent on risers across the whole board. I'll explain why it's only 3 sets when we get to the other side. So as the risers rise round, you'll be able to see that the inside line curves up at a much slower rate and reaches its top part a lot slower than the outside lines. I didn't want to necessarily put all of the pieces straight next to each other, because that would mean that they'd all be at different heights anyway. So what I actually did was I tried to spread them out a little bit, so it meant that I could put the 4 lines as far away from each other as possible to give a nice bit of space so that the locos weren't hitting each other on the way up. Now, the plan did give me a little bit of leeway with this anyway, but I wanted to give myself a little bit more. Now, one of the biggest problems I faced during this process was actually the waiting time. Once I got the risers down, I had to then glue them. I only have a certain amount of weights to hold them all down, so I found I was doing the inside line a little bit, putting weights on it. I'd then start on the outside line and then have to take the weights off the inside line. So effectively, it would be great if I had more weights. I didn't. So instead, it was a slow process getting the polystyrene glued down. I then faced the same problem when it came to laying the tracks. The other thing is, because all of my weights are metal, I couldn't run any trains because it would short circuit on the tracks. So this was a slow process that eventually meant that we had a nice incline with no problems on it. But it was one of those things where I had to just take my time. But when you just want to get the trains running on the layout, that can sometimes give you quite a problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to move a little bit closer so you can see the incline a little bit better. Okay, so we've got the incline climbing up over here. As I said, I glued all the track down on here. You can't use nails or screws because they just go straight into the polystyrene and don't actually give you any particular hold. I tried my hardest when it came to a straight section of track to try and make it that I started and finished on a straight section, so it meant connecting the track pieces was a little bit easier. This didn't always work out, but I tried my hardest to do it. Now, because I've used all my old baseboards here, you can see all of the previous dimensions that have been cut into there, but I think I've made a good use out of the space that I had. And as you can see, the lines all come around here, come around on this bit, and you can see the height difference as it all comes around. Where that cork starts on the left hand side is actually where the incline finishes on the outside 2 lines, and then the inside 2 lines come all the way up here. Now there's a little bit of tidying up, fettling that I want to do over here. For example, when I cut the shape, I gave myself a little bit excess on this piece, but now that it's all in, I will hopefully cut that off eventually, just so it means that when I start scenicking this area, it looks a little bit nicer. So just sweeping back around again, as you can see, there's the incline. And as I say, this is a 2% incline, and I used only about 1/3 of the actual incline risers because I didn't need the height clearance that you would need in 00, so it meant that I didn't have to worry about it. Now, this is where my friend Joseph from That Model Railway Guy comes in. So if you haven't seen Joseph's TT build, he actually had a really good idea about building these support structures for his incline section. And it just so happens that Joseph and I were using the same thickness of top board when it came to doing our top sections, and the pieces that Joseph used were the same height. So I got in contact with Joseph and asked if he'd be willing to sell me a few of them, because it would massively help me when I got to my incline sections. Joseph very gratefully helped me out with that. Now there's some other things from Joseph that I'm going to talk about in a future video, but not necessarily right now. So a big massive thank you to Joseph, because these sections, I used so many of them, and I probably wouldn't have been able to do it as well if I just tried cutting all the wood myself. It meant that I had uniform pieces that were all the same size when it came to the incline. So we then reached that bit, and then I have a giant piece of board that comes across. So let me back out and show you. So whilst trying to put as many supports as I possibly could in this section to make sure that there wasn't any sort of warping, I have had to actually purchase a few more from Joseph just to make sure that areas where they look a little bit sparse, I could just increase it and add a few more if needed. So I had a long piece of ply that I cut that effectively goes from the top of the incline, which stops there on the left hand side, and I effectively ran it all the way across to where it would go to the back. Now that back section is going to be the subject of next week's video, but I just wanted to talk about this bridge section. Now, in order to save myself some of the costs on the baseboards and to give the bridge section a little bit more rigidity, I actually made effectively a mini baseboard on the top bit here using some wooden planks to screw in to the sides, and this effectively gave me some rigidity on that bridge section across there, whilst also you can see underneath there's another one of the risers that Joseph produced for me. So as you go across the bridge here, it goes all the way out there where there's another blank section ready to go across that track piece. And then after the track had crossed there, I started curving it round to the top incline section. Now I placed a piece of board with some cork along the back there, just so if I decide to add any further track later down the line or have something that comes across out here, I can do, but that's where we're going to stop on this particular section. So just quickly talking about the pros and cons of this, I think the pro is it adds a really nice scenic element to the board. One of my favourite parts of it is being able to watch trains go across this bridge and trains go under it, and they sort of crisscross between it. And you can have one train that comes across this line and comes out here. Now, one thing from an official railway point of view, if you haven't watched the first video, this is effectively meant to be the crossover bridge that goes from Clapham Junction over to London Victoria, or at least resemble that bridge. Which there's a few elements of it that won't be the same. Effectively, it's 2 bridges in real life. I've decided to make it 1, and also because of how the layout effectively moves because that line here is the fast up going towards London, that is the fast down going away from London, that is the slow up going towards London, and the slow down moving away from London. What actually happens is as they come round, this line becomes the fast down, this line becomes the fast up, this line becomes the slow down, and this line becomes the slow up. There's not really much I can do about that, and to be honest, it's just nice having the trains run around. It does also mean that I get to test all of the different trains against different radius of track. So the outside line going up this hill is 6th radius, and the inner curve will be 3rd radius or somewhere thereabouts. And it means that when they join this top section here, the inside line here will actually be 3rd radius, 4th, 5th and 6th, and it means that all the trains can effectively run on 3rd radius, and I haven't had any problems with them yet. One other thing, the waiting time for all the glue to dry without actually being able to glue down any particular track on top of it was probably the most painful part of this area. It meant that I might have a few hours to do some track work, but because of drying times I was finding that I'd do a little bit and then I couldn't do any more, and that was probably one of the bits that really annoyed me. But from a visual point of view, I love watching the trains climb the incline, and my 08 shunter with 6 tanker wagons can get up that inside incline as well, so I find that quite impressive. So there you go, that shows you the curved incline section of this board, the challenges I faced along the way, and some of my favourite bits about it. Next week we're going to be talking about the upper level and the straight incline that goes down into the fiddle yard. So I hope you have enjoyed this. Once again, if you're stuck for Model Rail Podcast, you can find the Model Rail Replacement Podcast on YouTube, Amazon, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else that you enjoy your podcast. And it features myself and my friend James from the Western Signalman. If you've liked this video, please make sure that you click that subscribe button to see future updates. Click the like button for whatever the algorithm means. And if you want to, leave a comment down below and tell me what you are looking forward to coming out most in TT120. YouTube's now going to suggest a video that it thinks you might like. I've been SBJ. Thanks for checking out Emperor's Path, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!